All right, welcome on into the Detroit Lions News Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Chapin. Today, we have something really great for you. This is a former general manager, a former scout, talking about the Detroit Lions in a very uplifting way. Now, this guy, he was a big fan of Matt Patricia when he was with Detroit. He was a big fan of Bob Quinn. He was not a fan of when they hired Dan Campbell. So we're gonna get to that. But if you're on the Facebook page, you can go to the YouTube page Between the Whistles Detroit and subscribe. And if you're on the YouTube page and you want to go to get good Detroit Lions news, go to Detroit Lions News Podcast on Facebook, and you'll get a lot of great news on your feed. Now, Michael Lombardi of the GM Shuffle podcast, he has had a lot to say about Dan Campbell. And you see this a lot with some of these guys. They're eating their words over and over again about the things that they said about Dan Campbell in a non-lifting light because they think he's a meathead or they think he's like a gym bro or something along that lines. Now, Michael Lombardi was a scout with the San Francisco 49ers during their run of the Super Bowl and with Joe Montana and everything. He was also with the Patriots, the Raiders when they were good. And he's been a great front office member. That's why his opinion is more valid than other people's. We're gonna get to it. So on the first one, he specifically talks about Dan Campbell. Let's get to it. He says, I admit I have not been a huge fan of Lions head coach Dan Campbell's approach of biting kneecaps motivation. It was too high schoolerish for me. I prefer the more intellectual approach of reaching players, but I was wrong. Of course you were wrong, Michael Lombardi, because some people love the high schooler approach. You know, the intellectual way was the way that Matt Patricia did it. And how did that work? How did that work? He drove Darius Slay out. He drove Quandre Diggs out. He drove multiple players out. He ruined the locker room. Guy's a boo. Let's go on to the next one. He says, what I've learned in the last year and a half is Campbell and his staff can do both. They can play chess with their game plans and they can still get their players to play their best, which is the ultimate challenge. Since the start of November 2022, the Lions are 12-3 and improving. He goes on. They have a defensive front that can take over games, something that they didn't have last season. They are fun to watch. They have a winning formula similar to the San Francisco 49ers on offense. That's very interesting to note, which is also set up by their run game and play, which leads into their play action pass game. He goes on. Last week, without their two best offensive players, they dominated the Panthers in a 9.5 closing number, which was never in doubt. Their defense can complement their offense with the ability to rush the passer and extend leads. He goes on. Defensive end Aiden Hutchinson can create havoc for the opposing tackles with his skill set. Combined with his relentless effort, the Lions team dominating isn't a fluke. He goes on. This is the last one. He goes, they are for real and one of the few teams that have a legitimate chance to play in the Super Bowl for the first time in their franchise history. He gives a link out to his article. So if you want to go research Michael Lombardi, you can go on his Twitter and you can look it up. And I can even leave the link in the description on the Facebook page. But I thought it was very, very interesting because this is a guy that didn't like Dan Campbell, and he's eating his words. Now, Dan Campbell, the one thing I want to go back to is number 2. He says, what I've learned in the last year about, he could do both. Yes. Yes, Michael Lombardi, you can do both. You can be high schoolerish and you can be intellectual with your game plans. And what I see with the Detroit Lions, and a lot of people see with the Detroit Lions, if you look at their all 22, you look at some of the plays that they've designed, it's very technical. And it's not just I know a lot of people, they give a lot of credit to Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson is an incredible offense coordinator. He'll be a great head coach someday. But we got to remember something. This is Dan Campbell's offense. This is the offense he implemented after they fired Anthony Lynn. And Ben Johnson has came in, done a great job calling plays. The head coach usually doesn't want to call plays. Let's just be honest. Unless you're an over arrogant guy like Sean Payton or an over arrogant guy like Mike McCarthy. Of course, you're going to call your own plays because you think you know what's best. The thing about Dan Campbell that makes him great is that he is a team guy. He likes to be around the defense. He likes to be around the offense. He's made that known on his interviews multiple times. He likes to interact with the defense, the offense. He likes to interact with all these guys because he's a player and that's what they do. But when you look at this Detroit team, when he said that the Detroit Lions reminded him of the San Francisco 49ers. I want you to put that into perspective because I think a lot of people are over analyzing what the Detroit Lions are. And if you look at the way the Detroit Lions are built, they're kind of built like the 49ers. They got a guy at quarterback who isn't overwhelmingly athletic like, Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, a guy like of that ilk. You got Brock Purdy in San Francisco who plays a very great game and can make the throws that is asked of him. They got a great run game with Christian McCaffrey, and they got a great tight end with George Kittle. And you could have a great a great transformative running back with Jahmyr Gibbs when he gets some more reps. They got Deebo Samuel. You're hoping that Jameson Williams becomes Deebo Samuel. They got Brandon Ayuk. You got Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's a lot of parallels to these teams, but the one parallel that remains supreme is the offensive line. Their offensive line in San Francisco is really good. The Detroit Lions offensive line is really good. When you get to the playoffs, the reason I think that he's mentioning the Detroit Lions as a Super Bowl contender is specifically from this standpoint. When you get to the playoffs, what wins in the playoffs is the trenches. Period. End of story. Now, of course, there are some outliers, like with the Patrick Mahomes getting the Kansas City Chiefs to the Super Bowl with that makeshift offensive line that they had. But Patrick Mahomes is an alien. Okay. So that doesn't count. But you win games in the trenches. And I think a lot of people overanalyze it. They think that you win games with skill positions. And obviously, Brad Holmes has put a lot of drafting in to his skill positions. He's put a lot of draft positions into his players. And that's exactly what you're getting with this Detroit Lions team. It's going to be fun to watch what they do in the second half because they're playing teams with a 397 win percentage. They got the Bears twice, they got the Vikings twice, they got the Broncos. They got a lot of teams that they can absolutely handle. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Detroit Lions do and if they live up to Michael Lombardi's Super Bowl contender hype. I think the Detroit Lions could be a Super Bowl contender. Now they got more to prove. Obviously, if you're a Lions fan, you've seen some things before. But this team seems different with the way that they play the game and the way that they're coached. I want to know what you think. Do you think the Detroit Lions are a Super Bowl contender right now? Let me know in the comments, and we will talk about it in the comments. I appreciate you for viewing. I'll post daily videos on the Detroit Lions News podcast page on Facebook and YouTube. So stay tuned to that. And if you're a Detroit sports fan, Between the Whistles Detroit is a great opportunity for you to get good Detroit sports information on the dot. We will see you in the next video as we talk more Lions football, and we will see you in the next video.